Hello, this is the third episode of Unigine for Unity developers. During this episode, what I thought it would be nice to do together is to have a look at the Unigine editor and compare it side by side with the Unity editor. So what I did, I actually created a project in Unity, and this is the default project, this one. You create a new project from scratch, and this is what you see in Unity. With the sample scene, and tried to compare the editor here with the editor of Unigine. So I created a similar project in Unigine, and I will show you in a second how to actually get to this point where you can actually use the way we use it, what are the areas, and how at the end you'll be able to transfer assets between projects. Okay. First of all, I would like to point you to the documentation, which is always very good for Unigine. So always in developerunigine.com, you go under documentation, which is here, docs, and you have an area migrating to Unigine from Unity, which explains a number of things. I mentioned that during the last episode. We'll go through that. And especially here, they just show the differences in editor. I thought it would be nice to show them to you directly in the editors themselves. So let's see, we'll just jump to the Unigine editor as a new user, what to expect. So they're all basically the same, like you would do in, for example, for Unreal Engine. But also Unigine has a few more things. So how do you get there first? You will start, as always, with your SDK browser, okay? And you go into My Projects, create a new project, you define the name for the project. You can add, and I did it here, some add-ons. Those are free add-ons that come with Unigine. You have to download them, and then you'll find them available here. So for example, if I wanted to add this add-on here, which is actually what I did in the project I already created, you have some assets to work with, and then you say create new project. It takes about a minute, and you'll end up with a new project, which is this one, Unigine tutorial, the one I created here. For the add-ons, you go under the add-ons area, and you can install a number of add-ons. It will download them, and once you have them here, you will actually find them into My Projects add-on, like I just showed, okay? Going back to my Unigine screen, this is what you'll end up seeing when you actually open the project. Let me do something because my camera is a little slow. Yeah, so first of all, to navigate, you use the right mouse button and WASD, as for many things. As in Unity, you can change the speed of the camera here. This is actually the camera settings. You can change a number of things for the camera. One nice thing is this 1, 2, 3 feature. Basically this, if I click on 2 or hit 2 on my keyboard, my camera goes much faster. If I hit 3, and you see now 3 has changed, but I didn't click on it because I did it from the keyboard, I go very fast. And you can actually customize this. Also, if you shift and WASD, you just go forward faster, okay. This is the example scene that comes with Unigine. You can go up with E and Q, and so enter different environments. And you have a scene here. So the main difference when you use the editor is that when it run in Unity, you would have a screen that says game, okay, and you actually see the game in the camera. In Unigine, you don't have that, and I think there is a reason for that, and I'll explain it in a second. What you can do is actually from here hit play, okay. You can simulate. You have a couple of buttons to have a partial, let's say, simulation. If you look at that, this button toggles animations. We have no animations here. This one toggles sound, and this one finally toggles physics. As you see, we have a number of physical objects here that you know have gravity. So as soon as I hit here, bam, they're gonna fall and do things. All right. So I can disable that, and it will reload the world. If you actually want to play in the world, in this case, we have this scenery, and we have a first-person controller, which is a node. I'll explain that in a second, where you will be able to walk around and stuff. So I hit play, and a second window will open up. Okay, now it's loading on my second screen. It's here, and this is I mean, you see the physical objects have already fallen, and you can navigate and go up and down and things like that. Okay, you've seen that, I think, in several tutorials. So this is the main thing. Nice thing about this is it will lead you to a workflow which I use a lot. I tend to use Visual Studio, even though they recommend using Visual Studio Code, which is the default editor. You will be able to run your project from Visual Studio. So sometimes I never even open this unless I have to do some node works, you know, some parameters works and things like that. Looking at the different section. So this is the asset browser, and you see here I already have a folder called Unity Assets. You have a main folder for your project called Data, where everything is inside. Here you see a few world files. These are the level files in Unity. So if I go here, I have opened my scene file, which is called sample scene, and this is exactly the same thing, is a world in Unigine. Then going back to Unity, I have my hierarchy here where I see all my objects and my prefabs, which are blue. And the same thing we have here. In this case, we have in the word nodes, we have what they call, what in Unity is called game objects, in Unity is called node. And they are very powerful, as you will see in a moment, okay? And within the nodes or the game objects, you can nest things, okay? And you can switch them on and off. So in this case, I see I have a node that says static content. If I click here, everything disappears, everything's static, but the objects remain, okay? And then I have those building clusters, so that's just the buildings. So now I still have my ground, I have some light baking here, and I can either switch them off one by one, okay, or enable them, okay? This is the glass for the buildings, and you can see where it is. And this is actually the glass you can see here in transparency, okay? If I close it, you see no glasses anymore. And well, obviously the ground plane and things like that. So I'm still moving with WASD. To edit and move objects is quite easy. It's very, very much like Unity. You have this thing, this controller, W, ER, it's like Blender or 3ds Max to, you know, move, rotate, or scale. And that's the way you actually move objects, very easy. This is the material ball. You see, we have different type of nodes, and this is the first introduction to nodes. We have this one, and you see the type of node here. This is a node reference. A node reference is basically a prefab. You build something and you save it, you drag it into your into your asset browser, and this is where the node will become a node reference. You can transform a node reference, so it's a reference to a group of objects that are actually saved in your browser, and you can say instantiate object, instantiate node, and like you would do in the prefab in Unity. All those are prefabs, okay? So if I look at the material ball, it says, you know, it's a reference to a node called material ball. So if I go into edit, it will actually let me edit the material ball, changing, for example, the albedo color of the material ball. Let me just move it here, and I just change it to something different and such. I won't do that. I will just leave it as it is. When I exit the node, I can either apply or cancel. There are a number of tutorials on that, and actually I'll point you, because I don't want to waste too much time, showing you what is already in the Unigine documentation. Here, I would then post the link below the YouTube article. This is the interface overview. It explains in 3 minutes and better than I do how to use the Unigine interface. Then going in the different areas of the interface. So this is similar, and then when you select an object, you have the parameters for the object, okay? And obviously, depending on the object, you will have different type of parameters, and you have different type of nodes. We will go in much more in depth in the next tutorial. And so the nodes is what is called in Unity the hierarchy, and then the inspector is actually the parameters, okay? Let's look at the other ones. Asset browser, console. Okay, console is actually where you have errors from your build, okay? There are a few errors because I just did some things with the textures. You can actually clear them if you don't want to see them. And here you'll see also the bugs in your C# code, okay? Then we have a settings here, which is actually settings for rendering and things like that. Even hotkeys, you can change your hotkeys very easily here. Maybe you don't want to do to use the open world, the shortcuts. You can change all of those very easily, and even create your own. Okay, so here there are a number of them: navigation, splines, viewport. So in the viewport, context menu is on right click. You can change all of this, okay, and you can save it as a preset as well, okay. That's for the editor. Then you have the runtime, where you actually can change things like the shadow distance by default and things. All things you can actually do by code or within the world, okay. You've probably seen that, but you have a number of ready-made assets that you can make in a Word. You can add water, clouds very easily. I won't go through too much into that. There are a number of tutorials out there doing that. If you want to preview the scene and you don't want to view all the things, you just go here, and no, that's the configuration thing, and it's in the, where is it? In the helpers, visualizer, disable, and you stop seeing all the boxes and things, and you just see the things you selected, or you go back to helpers, visualizers, always on top, and you actually see this is a mesh, a camera, and things like that, okay. What else? I have, for example, here a first-person controller. This is it's an object. It's actually a node reference to a node that has a camera in it, okay, and it allows you to do all the forward, back, run, and things. You can change the speeds. It's a basic first-person controller, and what you can do is, for example, since this node has a camera. You don't do it here, I have to do it in a different way, but you can actually, if I create a player, which is a camera, it's called camera, dummy, which is one of the cameras. First of all, the cameras, this is a strange thing, cameras always point downwards, so maybe I want to orient my camera to see something. The easiest way to do it is, you see here I have an editor camera. I'm going to use the player dummy camera, and I'm just, gonna move it where I want it to be, maybe the other side around, and maybe, here, I'm just, WASDing at the speed of 1. Once I have this placed, as you see, if you look at the numbers here, when I move it, it's actually changing the position and the orientation of the camera. I can change the field of view of the camera as well, okay, and maybe make it, I don't know, 80 degrees, and so you have a more wide open camera, 60 degrees, okay. You can define the near clipping and the far clipping. Near is the nearest object seen by the camera, and far clipping is the farthest object. So if I put here, for example, 10 meters, it will cut, you see, the closest view, and if I put here instead of 2000 meters, 20,000 meters. I mean, Unigine is made for large words, so it starts like 20,000 meters already. And I put 10 meters or 50 meters. It will actually cut, if you see that on the top left corner, it cut the thing out. Okay? And you can also have post-processing materials on the camera, but we won't go through that yet. So those are the cameras, and as I remember you can change the camera speeds here. So if I hit 2, I'm gonna go much faster. 2 is too fast for me, maybe I want it to go 10 meters per second, and this is now more acceptable. Shifting, it goes twice as fast, and things like that. Okay, so this is the camera. Now let's go into a little more detailed windows that you won't find much. Okay, so word node parameters, very much like Unity. Settings, that's the settings. In Unity it's more hidden. You have them right here, so it's very easy to access. And those two windows are unusual. Okay, one is called properties and the other one is called materials. So what are those? Well, as I say, materials, you probably guess what it is. It's actually a link to the materials. And properties is actually, I will go deeper into that in a second. Properties is properties of nodes. Okay, so what happens in Unity? When you have an object, and like here, normally you create an empty game object, okay? And in order to do something, basically you create a transform. In order to do something, you have to add components to it, okay? Which is a mesh component, a renderer, and things like that. Unigine allows you to do that as well, but it has, first of all, pre-made nodes, okay? And then you can even add custom things to nodes. So in order to add things to your scene, you would do to create, and you have a number of nodes, okay? Node. We mentioned the node reference, but you will actually use it in a different way. Most of the time you would create a node dummy. A node dummy is basically a game object, okay? And I place it here. So this is my node dummy. It sits there in the scene, and this is very similar, if you look at it, to a transform, okay, a game object. There's nothing, position, rotation, and scale. Position, rotation, and scale. But, and you can add component and properties to that. You see, now you can add properties. So what is a property? So let's say you have a bunch of houses where you want to create node with custom behaviors, okay? Maybe a node where each house has its own color property, and you might want to change it by code, okay? So select off all the houses, get the color, and change the color. You don't really need necessarily to do a component for that. You can also use a property. Properties are, in fact, XML files where you create a standard by hand, and you can then reuse them within the project. And what happens is that when you create a new property, you actually always create a child. So I create a child called my property. Okay? And this is why you actually see it in a form of inheritance. For example, here you have the C# component is a property, and the first person controller has his own properties. Whenever you create a C# component, and we had this first person component here, it will be actually a combination of a property and a C# script. Let's have a look at it, okay? So I have here my first person controller C#, and you see all those properties here. If I go into seeing the asset in the browser and I double click, by default, it opens Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to drag it into the window. And so, in fact, it has created a C# class with a number of things. If you work with Unity and editor decorations, you'll recognize them. So you can create, those are all, you know, public parameters for our first person controller script. And and then you have the code, you know, way below. This is a long, it has a lot of things, okay? Looks like the Unreal first person controller. And you can create structs that then you publish, okay? And so I just grabbed a very long and complex script. My scripts are much smaller than that one. Oh, it even has the debug things, but okay, now here it's gonna set if it's on ground and do a lot of verification on this update velocity function. Okay, components in Unigine are very similar to Unity. You have an update physics, you have an update, okay, and an init and a shutdown. Okay, so init is what it does whenever the node is actually instantiated or created. Then it will gonna cycle through the update to do all the visual things, okay? And then you have, obviously from the updates, is gonna update, calls several other functions, you know, update crouch. If I go to the implementation, I'll see what it does. And then update physics, which is actually the physics update, which I recommend putting all the forces and impulses here, because otherwise you get very unreliable results. So here, whatever is visual in the update, and in the update physics, whatever is actually managing physics, okay? And so those are, you know, custom methods that are being called from the, for example, in the update. This is where it calls it, okay? But at the same time, it created a property. So let's try and do that very quickly. So I'll explain you. So let's say I create a new C# component. I'm gonna go here in the components. Why not? Oh, well, I'll just put it here in my root folder. Create a C# component, and I'm gonna call it test component. I won't do much in this video. I will then, you know, do more C# later in more defined projects, okay? If I double click on that, I have my class test component, blah, 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 blah. So I would say public string name, I don't know, public float speed. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. If I save it, then it will process it and tell me here that it was built successfully. Then here, if you look at the properties, it's created a test property which has name and speed. Not much use here, but you could create manually a similar property to use, for example, in your objects where you don't want to have a script in. So it's an inheritance-based way of managing things, okay? And it's also created, you know, this is a my property prop, okay, which I did there. If I go here and show in Explorer, okay, and I open it with, okay, it opens with Visual Studio Code already. Basically, you see it's an XML file. I don't know why it keeps on opening that, okay. It's a property, and then I can say, okay, you know, properties, you have to manage them manually. Okay, property. And I'm gonna do something which makes it faster, okay. Remember the syntax. I'm gonna tell you what I'm doing here, because basically what I've done is I'll explain in the next tutorial what are the runtime files, but what I want you to do is to have something very easy to copy. So this is my property prop. I'm just copy paste some code here. I'm gonna close that, and I did my name. This is gonna be called my name as a property, and this shouldn't close because it's a thing. Now I have my property called my name and my speed. So imagine you apply that to a static object, something that doesn't have code, okay? So if I look at my property, now I have my name and my speed, where I can put things. So maybe I can do, you know, here, I'm gonna add a property to this node, here. Where is it? Now I'm gonna do it like this, okay? Add component, gonna add my property here, and my name is, oh, my name is node dummy. And my speed is 1 because I'm a very slow node dummy. Then I'm gonna duplicate the node with Control D, and this is another dummy. And my speed is gonna be 3 because I'm faster, okay? Now what happened is each node now has those parameters that are saved within the node itself, so within the transform, and it's kind of powerful because it gives you, you know, a lot of possibilities of selecting all those nodes and, you know, doing a gameplay outside of the component parts. So I mentioned components many times, and if you remember in Unity you have those mono behaviors, but then if you look, you know, if you want to get a mono behavior from Unity, they will say, okay, game object, get component. So I don't call them component, and that's exactly what they did in Unigine. I mean, node, get component, will get you the component. I'll show you that in a more, you know, in a more thorough example when you go to coding. So a component is a mono behavior, very easy. And properties, you know, are inheritable things. So let's say I have my property and I say I can create a clone, which is a duplicate, okay, show asset, rename, delete, or create a child. Now I'm gonna call this my large property. This property inherits from the property, okay? Show asset, show in Explorer, open it up. Okay, my large property is here. Oh yeah, it has nothing. Why? Because basically it inherits from there, so it doesn't really, it needs that. Let's say I want to add a few other parameters to that. I'm gonna go to my large property here, add a few more parameters. My last name, for example, and my age. Okay, and then I have to remember. So this is, you know, to create properties, you actually do it this way. But then once you set them up, and it's actually quite cool you have extensible game objects, which is, I think, cool. I'm gonna close my property tag and don't forget to take it out here. So now if I go back to my editor and I look at my large property, I have my name and my last name and my speed and my age. So it's like this one, it has inherited the property, and now we have more properties here. You can work absolutely like in Unity without using property, but because it works perfectly with a component like we did before. We have this component where I have my mono behavior, and I do things with my component exactly like they did in the first person controller. Though I think that for certain, and I'll show you, for example, in our project, which is a very large project, I'll give you some images. I'll show you something in the next projects. We use property, for example, for input properties and such. So it's quite powerful, and we use that a lot. So having a set of XML files to configure your project without having to go into mono behavior or adding, you know, wasteful object in the scene. You will see that as soon as I do the coding. I want to do just one last thing, materials. Materials are working. So materials are basically the way you put materials on objects. So if I select this cube, and I have, you remember this is a node reference, so it's a prefab, okay? I'm going to edit, okay? And now I have my cube, which is an object mesh static, which is actually this one, a cube. And this cube is a max, is actually an FBX import, and this cube has a number, I mean the node for the cube has a number of properties. It has surfaces and it has materials. So this is a material of the cube, okay, and this is the cube mat. What I can do is either create a new material, or maybe I can, do the same thing. Create a child of the material, and I call cube material 0, whatever. It appears wherever you actually have the your asset browser positioned. I'm gonna just drag it to the data because I prefer to have it there. So it's there now. And maybe I would say that the albedo is gonna be red, whatever, okay? And now what I can do, I go to my cube here. So this is a node. Let's say I want to do a red, I want to keep the blue cube. So this one has a blue material, okay? I want to keep the blue cube, but also have a red cube. What am I going to do? I'm going to go to the asset itself, which is here. Here. I'm going to go to the node. I can do Control-C and Control-V or Control-D, which duplicates, and I call that red cube. So basically, or not red cube, but red cube. Now this red cube node, I can edit it, I can bring it into the scene. It will bring it in as a reference, so as a node reference, thus prefab. And I'm gonna change the material here. I called it red cube material, right? Cube something. Cube material 0. Here we go. Okay, and now it's red. I just duplicated, and now I have the node. It has exactly the same characteristics as the other one, but it's a red one. Now, you've seen that I've created this cube here and here. Sorry, this is where the mesh is. Let me go back to my red cube here and navigate to the asset itself. It's a node reference, apply, and then I'm going here. This is my red cube. When I drag it into the scene, it will create a node reference, okay? But maybe I don't want to drag it into, maybe I want to create, just bring the whole asset there instead of a node reference. And so what I can do is place as node reference, which is the default, or place as a node content. So I'm actually placing the full asset there. Maybe I didn't place it while this didn't show, and you can, you have those easy thing, snap to the ground, and which for some, because it snaps to the ground based on the mesh center and pivot. So let's say you have objects that you want to snap to the ground. They have to have the pivots at the bottom to use the snap to ground feature. And so that's enough. That's just to show you what the windows are. Then we will go more in depth into the materials themselves, the nodes themselves, and the component themselves. Okay, in the next episode, I will dig deeper into the nodes and the structure and comparing that between Unity and Unigine. I will stop this video now because we are in the 33 minutes and I don't want to keep them so long. So here, just in a few minutes, I'll start the next video, and so you can follow them together. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.